My name is Maribel Torres. I was 36 years old when I learned that being civil doesn't always mean being safe. On paper, my life looked stable, respectable even. I ran a small digital advertising firm in Seattle, nothing flashy, but profitable, growing, and entirely mine. I paid my own bills, I chose my own clients, I answered to no one except deadlines and my daughter's school calendar. And my daughter, Lily, was the best part of my life. She was 9, all elbows and curiosity. The kind of kid who took apart toys just to see how they worked and then forgot to put them back together. She loved robotics club, hated dresses with itchy seams, and asked questions that made adults uncomfortable because they required actual thought. Her father, Colin, and I had been divorced for 3 years. There was no screaming match, no cheating scandal, no dramatic courtroom showdown. We just stopped being in love. Somewhere along the way, we became roommates who coordinated carpools and dentist appointments, but no longer spoke the same emotional language. When we finally admitted it, the divorce was almost anticlimactic. We told ourselves we were doing it the right way. Joint custody, shared holidays, no lawyers at war. We still sat together at Lily's school events, smiled in photos, pretended we'd cracked the code on healthy co-parenting. And for the most part, I believed it. Colin was a good father in the ways that were visible. He showed up. He paid child support without complaint. He loved Lily, of that I never doubted. What I underestimated was the influence of his family, especially his father. Vincent Torres was the kind of man who filled a room without raising his voice. Old school businessman, commercial real estate. Self-made, according to him, though his definition of self conveniently excluded a quiet wife who'd spent decades smoothing his edges. Vincent liked legacies, bloodlines, the Torres name. He loved to talk about what he'd built, but rarely about who would inherit it. I'd noticed things over the years, small things. The way his face lit up when Colin's cousin announced another baby boy. The way he'd ask Colin about work but barely acknowledge my career unless it was to ask if it interfered with Lily's needs. Once, over Sunday dinner, he suggested Lily switch from robotics to dance. Girls need grace, he'd said, smiling like he was offering wisdom, not erasure. Colin had laughed it off. That's just dad being dad, he told me later. Different generation. And I let it go. Because Vincent was never openly cruel to Lily. He was just distant, polite, like she was a placeholder for a grandson he assumed would eventually arrive. I told myself distance was better than hostility. I was wrong. That Wednesday in October started like any other. I was buried in a campaign pitch, juggling metrics and deadlines, when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Oak Ridge Elementary. My stomach dropped instantly. Schools don't call in the middle of the day unless something is wrong. Miss Torres? Yes. This is Vice Principal Hoffman. Lily had an accident during recess. The word accident echoed too loudly in my head. What kind of accident? She fell from the climbing structure, hit her head. She's conscious, but we've called an ambulance as a precaution. She's being taken to Swedish Medical Center. I didn't shut down my computer. I didn't grab my jacket. I grabbed my keys and ran. The drive was a blur of red lights and worst-case scenarios. Head injuries, concussions, brain bleeds. I was going 45 in a 30 and didn't care. When I burst through the emergency room doors, breathless and shaking, the first thing I noticed was who wasn't there. Colin. Instead, standing in the hallway outside the ER intake was Vincent. Perfectly pressed charcoal suit, Italian leather shoes, not a hair out of place. He looked like he'd stepped out of a board meeting, not into a trauma ward. Vincent, I said sharply, where's Lily? He uncrossed his arms slowly, as if my urgency were an inconvenience. The child is fine, he said. You're overreacting. The child. Not Lily. Not your granddaughter. Where is my daughter? I stepped closer, my voice tight. They're examining her. Colin's in Boston for that waterfront presentation. I was listed as the emergency contact this week. My heart stuttered. Vincent. He had been listed instead of me. Before I could respond, a nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. Are you Lily Torres's mother? Yes, can I see her? The nurse glanced at Vincent. Something passed across her face. Of course, but I need to speak with you first, privately. Vincent stepped forward. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of me. The nurse's jaw tightened. Sir, I need to speak with the mother, alone. There was steel in her voice. Vincent hesitated, then waved a dismissive hand, as if allowing a delay in a meeting. As I followed the nurse down a narrow hallway, a chill settled in my chest. Something had already gone wrong. I just didn't know how badly yet. The consultation room was barely bigger than a storage closet. One narrow table, 2 chairs, fluorescent lights that hummed faintly overhead, casting everything in a pale, unforgiving glow. The nurse closed the door behind us with a soft but deliberate click, like she was sealing something in or keeping something out. She turned to face me, clipboard pressed tightly against her chest. My name is Sharon Bradley, she said. I'm the head nurse for this wing. I nodded, my pulse roaring in my ears. Is Lily okay? She's stable, Sharon said carefully, but I need to tell you exactly what happened when she was brought in. The word exactly made my stomach twist. She has a mild concussion, Sharon continued. She'll recover fully, but when the paramedics arrived, she was showing classic signs of head trauma, disorientation, nausea, unequal pupil dilation. I swallowed. Okay, so what's the problem? Sharon's grip tightened on the clipboard. Her knuckles went white. Standard protocol in that situation is immediate neurological assessment and a CT scan to rule out internal bleeding. My heart thudded harder. And? She looked me directly in the eye. Your ex-father-in-law prevented us from taking her to imaging. For a second, I was sure I'd misheard her. I'm sorry, what? He physically blocked our staff, Sharon said. When my colleague tried to wheel Lily to radiology, he stepped in front of the doorway. When she tried to move around him, he put his hand on her shoulder and stopped her. The room tilted slightly. He told us, Sharon continued, her voice tight but controlled, and I'm quoting him exactly, "Don't waste resources on her. If this were my grandson, different story, but it's just a girl." The words landed like a punch to the chest. I reached out blindly and gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. He said that? My voice sounded distant, even to me. Yes. How long? I asked, dread crawling up my spine. How long did he stop you? Sharon didn't hesitate. 26 minutes. 26 minutes. My 9-year-old daughter had been sitting in an emergency room with a head injury, and Vincent Torres had decided she wasn't worth immediate care. Why? I whispered. He said you and your ex-husband were raising her to be soft, Sharon replied. That girls need to learn toughness. That in his family, they only invest in male heirs. I couldn't breathe. 26 minutes wasn't just a number. It was an eternity in emergency medicine. It was the difference between fine and irreversible, between a scare and a funeral. Is she really okay? I asked, my voice breaking. Please tell me she's really okay. She's okay, Sharon said gently. Dr. Kwan arrived and overrode Mr. Torres's objections. He threatened to have security remove him if he didn't step aside. I closed my eyes, nausea rolling through me. But Miss Torres, Sharon added quietly, those 26 minutes could have been critical. If Lily had been bleeding internally, every second would have mattered. What your ex-father-in-law did wasn't just inappropriate. It was dangerous. The walls felt like they were closing in. Where is she now? I asked. Room 7. Sharon hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. I documented everything, she said, handing it to me. Every word he said, the timeline, witness statements, security footage. You're going to need this. I took the folder with shaking hands. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for fighting for her. Sharon's expression hardened. That's my job. What you do next, that's yours. But, Miss Torres, that man is dangerous. I left the consultation room on autopilot. The hallway felt longer than before, brighter, louder. My legs moved, but I barely felt them. When I pushed open the door to room 7, the sight of Lily nearly brought me to my knees. She looked so small in the oversized hospital gown. A white bandage covered her forehead, and her eyes were red-rimmed, lashes clumped from crying. And sitting beside her bed, scrolling through his phone like he was waiting for a delayed flight, was Vincent. "Mommy," Lily whispered when she saw me. I rushed to her, pulling her into my arms as carefully as I could. "I'm here," I murmured. "I'm so sorry, baby." She clung to me. "Mr. Vincent said you were busy with work stuff," she said softly, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "He said I needed to stop being a baby about it." I lifted my head and looked straight at Vincent. He met my gaze with the same mild irritation I'd seen 100 times before, like this whole situation was an inconvenience he hadn't scheduled. "She's fine," he said flatly. "Stop coddling her, Maribel. Kids fall. That's life." I gently eased Lily back onto the bed, making sure she was comfortable. Then I stood. "Get out," I said. Vincent blinked. "Excuse me?" "Get out of this room. Now." He stood slowly, smoothing his suit jacket. "You're being irrational. The girl barely has a scratch." "The girl has a name," I said coldly. "She's your granddaughter, and you blocked medical staff from treating her because she's not the grandson you wanted." "I made a practical decision," he snapped, "based on the situation." "You made a sexist one," I replied, "and you endangered her life." His jaw tightened. "We'll discuss this later." "Not here," I said. "Not in front of Lily. You will leave now, or I will have security remove you." For the first time, something flickered across Vincent's face. Surprise! Maybe even fear. "Colin will hear about this," he muttered. "Good," I said. "Make sure you tell him everything you did today. Every word. Every minute you delayed her treatment." Vincent left without another word. The second the door closed, my knees gave out. I sank into the chair beside Lily's bed, clutching the manila folder like it was the only thing keeping me upright. After a nurse came in to check Lily's vitals, I stepped into the hallway and pulled out my phone. I needed to call Colin. But first, I needed to call someone else. I scrolled until I found the number I'd hoped I'd never need again. Rachel Brennan, my divorce lawyer. At the time, she'd told me, "If you ever need anything, call me directly." I'd smiled and said I wouldn't. I pressed call. "Rachel Brennan." "Rachel," I said, my voice shaking. "It's Maribel Torres. I need your help." I told her everything. The fall, the hospital, Vincent's words, the 26 minutes. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Maribel," Rachel said finally, "what you're describing is child endangerment, potentially criminal." "I have documentation," I said quickly. "The head nurse gave me everything." "Good," Rachel replied. "Don't talk to Vincent. Don't talk to Colin yet. Bring me everything you have." "Lily has to stay overnight," I said. "Observation. Then come to my office first thing tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She paused. "And Maribel, this is serious. This isn't just family drama." After I hung up, my phone buzzed. Colin calling. I stared at the screen, rage and grief tangling in my chest. I took a breath and answered. My thumb hovered over the green button for half a second longer than it should have. Not because I didn't want to answer Colin, because I already knew what I was going to hear. When you spend years smoothing over someone's behavior, making excuses for the sake of peace, your body learns a pattern. Conflict is coming, so brace yourself. I pressed accept. "Maribel," Colin said immediately, voice sharp with panic. "What the hell happened? My dad just called me screaming about you throwing him out of the hospital." I stared at the white hospital wall across from Lily's room. The fluorescent light made everything feel unreal, like I'd slipped into a version of my life where nothing was safe anymore. "Did he tell you why I threw him out?" I asked. Colin exhaled hard. "He said Lily fell and you overreacted. He said he was trying to help." "Stop," I cut in. One word, flat, like a door slamming shut. Silence. Then Colin, quieter. "Maribel, your father physically blocked nurses from treating Lily for 26 minutes. There was a pause so long I could hear hospital announcements echoing down the corridor behind me. "She hit her head," I continued, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. "She needed imaging, a CT scan. He stopped them. He refused to let them take her." Colin's breath caught. "No." "Yes." He swallowed audibly. There has to be some misunderstanding. My dad can be intense, but he wouldn't. He told them, and I'm quoting exactly, "Don't waste resources on her. If this was my grandson, different story, but it's just a girl." Another pause. Longer. I waited, almost daring him to say it was a misunderstanding again. "Maribel," Colin finally said, voice tight, "that doesn't sound like him." I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was the oldest lie in our marriage. "That doesn't sound like him," I repeated. "Colin, I have written statements from medical staff. There's security footage. There's a hospital report. This isn't rumor. This is documentation." "You're sure?" My hands clenched around my phone until my knuckles ached. "No, Colin," I snapped. "I'm not sure. I just enjoy imagining your father risking our daughter's life for sport." "Don't do that," he said, wounded now. "I'm not. I'm trying to understand." "You're trying to understand his side." My voice rose before I could stop it. I forced it down again when a nurse glanced my way. "His side is on paper. His side is on video. His side is 26 minutes of delay." "I was in Boston," Colin said quickly. "I didn't even know this happened until my dad called." "And why?" I asked, each word measured. "Was your father listed as Lily's emergency contact?" Colin hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "It was just for this 1 week," he said. "I had the trip, and you were in that big meeting today. You weren't answering your phone." "I was in a client meeting that you knew about," I said. "You could have listed my assistant. You could have listed my mom. You could have listed literally anyone else." "He's my father," Colin said, defensive. "I didn't think—" "You didn't think," I repeated softly. "And now Lily is in a hospital bed because your father thinks she's not worth saving." The line went quiet. I could hear the faint hum of an airport announcement behind him, proof he was still somewhere between Boston and Seattle, while his daughter sat with a concussion. "Can I come see her?" he asked finally, voice softer. "Your flight gets in when?" "Tomorrow afternoon." "Then you can see her tomorrow," I said, "and then we'll talk." "Maribel." "But Colin," I cut in again, and this time my voice didn't shake. It went cold. "You need to decide whose side you're on." His breath hitched. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done making excuses for him," I said. "I'm done pretending his views don't matter. Lily deserves better than being treated like a disappointment because she wasn't born with the right body parts." "That's not fair," Colin said. "I love her." "I know you do," I replied, and that was the most painful part. "But loving her isn't enough if you keep handing her to someone who sees her as just a girl." "Maribel, please," he said, voice rising again. "We can handle this as a family." I looked through the small window of Lily's door. She was curled on her side, clutching a stuffed fox she'd had since kindergarten. A child sleeping under harsh hospital lighting, not because of the fall, but because of what came after. "This is beyond family," I said quietly. "Your father committed a crime." "Don't say that." "It's already been said," I replied, "by the hospital." He was quiet again. I could almost hear him wrestling with the idea of his father as something other than a powerful, respected man. "You threw him out," Colin said at last, and it sounded like he was clinging to that detail because it was easier than the rest. "He said you humiliated him." "I protected our daughter," I said. "If he feels humiliated, good. He should." Colin's voice lowered, strained. "I talked to him. He said things got blown out of proportion, that he was trying to prevent unnecessary procedures." I closed my eyes for one beat, letting the rage flood through me. "Unnecessary," I repeated. "A CT scan for a head injury. Colin, do you understand what those 26 minutes could have meant?" I dash. "If she'd been bleeding in her brain," I said, voice trembling now with raw fear, "she could have died, or lived with permanent damage, and your father decided her life was optional because she's not a boy." Colin exhaled sharply. "Maribel, I need to talk to him again. I need to hear it from him." "No," I said instantly. "You need to hear it from your daughter, and from the people who witnessed it." His tone snapped. "You're acting like I'm the enemy." "I'm acting like Lily's mother," I said. "And right now, anyone who minimizes what happened is part of the danger." The words hung between us, heavy as lead. "Maribel," Colin said, quieter, almost pleading. Please don't do anything drastic. Don't involve lawyers. Don't call the police. He made a mistake. I felt something inside me shift. Not rage, not grief. Something colder. You think this is about punishing him, I said. It's not. This is about preventing him from ever getting close enough to do it again. And you think I'd let him? You already did, I cut in. You already put him between our daughter and help. That silence again. But this time it was different. Not disbelief, not confusion. It was the sound of someone realizing they might be wrong and hating that feeling. I tightened my grip on the phone. I'm meeting my lawyer tomorrow morning, I said. What? Colin's voice sharpened. Maribel, come on. I'm not asking permission, I replied. I'm informing you. This is going to blow everything up, he said. It already blew up, I answered. The moment your father decided my daughter's brain wasn't worth the hospital's resources. Maribel, get on your flight, I said. See Lily tomorrow, and then decide who you are. His voice cracked. I'm her father. Then act like it, I said. I ended the call before he could say anything else. When the screen went dark, my reflection stared back at me for a second. Eyes wide, skin pale, lips pressed into a line I barely recognized. I walked back into Lily's room and sat in the chair beside her bed. For a long time, I just watched her breathe. Inhale. Exhale. Alive. Stable. Safe for now. But I couldn't stop thinking about what Sharon had said. That man is dangerous. Because danger wasn't always someone raising a fist. Sometimes danger wore a suit, smoothed his jacket, spoke calmly while a child's life hung in the balance. Sometimes danger was a grandfather who called your daughter the child and meant it like a demotion. I slid the manila folder onto my lap and opened it. Witness statements, timeline. Notes in clean, professional handwriting. The truth, stapled and labeled. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the evidence until my eyes burned, and I made myself a promise so clear it felt like a vow. Vincent Torres would never be alone with my daughter again. Not for 1 minute. Not for 1 second. And if Colin couldn't understand that, then I would protect Lily from him too. Lily stayed overnight for observation. They dimmed the lights in her room and wheeled in a narrow cot for me, but sleep never came. Every time she shifted, every time the monitor beeped, my body jolted awake, adrenaline flooding my veins like the danger was still unfolding. I kept seeing the same thing over and over. Vincent's hand on the nurse's shoulder. His voice, calm, dismissive. Don't waste resources on her. At dawn, a resident came in to check Lily's pupils and reflexes. She smiled and told us Lily was doing well, that the nausea had subsided, that the headache was improving. I thanked her, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. By mid-morning, Lily was discharged with instructions for rest, limited screen time, and a follow-up appointment. I packed her things slowly, deliberately, like if I moved too fast, something terrible might still catch up to us. My mother arrived to take Lily home with her for the afternoon. I'll make soup, she said gently, and we'll watch something boring. Lily nodded, sleepy but smiling. Mom? She asked as I helped her into her jacket. Yes, sweetheart. Am I in trouble? The question sliced straight through me. No, I said immediately, kneeling in front of her. You didn't do anything wrong. You got hurt, and grown-ups didn't handle it the way they should have. She seemed to think about that, then nodded like she accepted the answer. As they left, I stayed behind in the hospital lobby, the manila folder heavy in my bag. At 9 o'clock sharp the next morning, I sat in Rachel Brennan's office. She'd already brought in another attorney, Jordan Mills, a family law specialist with calm eyes and a voice that didn't flinch when the word endangerment was used. Jordan read through the documentation without interruption. Witness statements, security timestamps, the hospital's internal report to Child Protective Services. When he finished, he set the folder down carefully. What Vincent Torres did meets Washington State's legal definition of child endangerment, he said. He willfully interfered with emergency medical care for a minor in distress. My stomach clenched. Even hearing it stated so plainly felt unreal. Can we stop him from seeing her, I asked. Immediately? Yes, Jordan said. We'll file for an emergency protective order today. That will legally prohibit him from contacting Lily pending a full hearing. Relief surged through me, brief, sharp. But, Rachel added gently, we also need to talk about Colin. The word landed like a bruise. He didn't do this, I said quickly. He wasn't there. No, Jordan agreed. But he designated Vincent as an emergency contact. The court will want to understand why. I closed my eyes. Because I'd let it happen. Because I'd told myself distance wasn't danger. Because I'd swallowed my instincts for the sake of peace. There were comments, I admitted quietly, over the years, about girls, about legacy. I brushed them off. Jordan nodded. That's what we'll need to document, a pattern. My phone buzzed on the desk. Colin. Rachel met my eyes and nodded once. Put it on speaker, I answered. Maribel, Colin said, breathless. I'm at the airport. I'm coming straight to the hospital. She's already been discharged, I said. She's with my mom. There was a pause. Your mom? He asked. Yes. Why? Because I don't trust you yet, I thought. Instead, I said, because she needs rest. I need to talk to you, Colin said. In person. I'm at my lawyer's office, I replied. Silence. Your lawyer? He said. This is Jordan Mills, Jordan said calmly into the phone. I'm representing Maribel in a child welfare matter. What? Colin snapped. Why do you have two lawyers? Because your father endangered our daughter, I said evenly. And I'm making sure he never has the opportunity to do it again. You're overreacting, Colin said reflexively. Rachel leaned forward. Mr. Torres, she said, professional and composed, we're filing for an emergency protective order today. Vincent Torres will not be permitted to contact Lily. A protective order, Colin repeated. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I said. He's my father, Colin said, and Lily is my daughter. Then choose, I replied. The line went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was tight. This feels like a threat. It's a fact, Jordan said. The court will assess whether you exercised appropriate judgment in granting your father access to Lily. I hung up before the argument could spiral further. That afternoon, I made the call I should have made years ago. A child psychologist. Dr. Sarah Nguyen came highly recommended. Specialized in family trauma, gentle but thorough. Lily had her first session 2 days later. After the third appointment, Dr. Nguyen asked to speak with me alone. Maribel, she said carefully, there are some things Lily has been sharing that concern me. My stomach dropped. She's been internalizing Vincent's comments for a long time, Dr. Nguyen continued. She believes, on some level, that she's a disappointment because she isn't a boy. The words knocked the air from my lungs. She told you that? I whispered. She told me about times Vincent talked about the family legacy, Dr. Nguyen said. How he asked her father if they'd try again for a boy. How he bought elaborate gifts for her male cousins but gave her gift cards. Memories flooded back. The birthdays, the excuses I made. He doesn't know what girls like. She also told me, Dr. Nguyen added gently, that he said women should be quiet and agreeable, that being pretty mattered more than being smart. I felt sick. She never told me, I said. Because she thought it was normal, Dr. Nguyen replied. Children trust authority figures. She didn't realize it was wrong until she saw you stand up to him at the hospital. Tears finally came then, hot, unstoppable. I failed her, I said. No, Dr. Nguyen said firmly. You believed the adults around you would protect her. When you learned they didn't, you acted. That matters. I nodded, wiping my face. What happens now? I asked. We continue therapy, she said, and we keep Vincent away from her, permanently. His influence has already damaged her self-worth. It can't continue. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down every comment I could remember. Dates, holidays, offhand remarks that hadn't seemed dangerous at the time. By the time I finished, the page was full. The pattern was undeniable. And for the first time, I stopped asking myself how I'd missed it and started asking how close I'd come to losing her because of it. The protective order hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. The morning of, Seattle woke under a blanket of gray clouds so low they seemed to press down on the city. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, the kind of neutral space where people's worst moments were reduced to case numbers and folders. I arrived early with Rachel and Jordan, clutching my bag like it was armor. Vincent arrived 10 minutes later. He wore a navy suit this time, darker than the one he'd worn to the hospital. His expression was tight, irritated, like this entire proceeding was an inconvenience he planned to correct. Beside him walked his attorney, Arthur Whitmore, sleek and polished, the kind of man who smiled without warmth. Colin came last. He hesitated in the doorway before stepping inside, scanning the room like he wasn't sure where he belonged. When his eyes met mine, something flickered. Regret, fear, maybe both. But he looked away before I could read it. We were ushered into a mediation room with a long table and mismatched chairs. No jury, no audience, just a judge, stacks of documents, and the quiet hum of consequence. Judge Ramirez entered a moment later. She was in her 50s, hair pulled back, expression unreadable. She took her seat, glanced at the file in front of her, and nodded once. "Let's begin," she said. Arthur Whitmore spoke first. "Your Honor, this entire situation has been wildly blown out of proportion," he said smoothly. "My client made an error in judgment during a stressful medical situation. He's willing to apologize and undergo family counseling." Judge Ramirez looked up slowly. "An error in judgment," she repeated, "that resulted in a 9-year-old girl not receiving immediate medical care for a head injury?" Whitmore cleared his throat. "Medical staff often misinterpret statements made under stress." Rachel slid a folder across the table. "We have sworn statements from 3 medical professionals," she said calmly. "Security footage, a documented timeline. Mr. Torres explicitly stated that Lily did not deserve the same care a male child would receive." Jordan opened another folder. "This is the hospital's report to Child Protective Services," he added. "The attending physician wrote, and I quote, 'Vincent Torres posed an active threat to the minor patient's welfare and required security intervention.'" Vincent shifted in his seat, face flushing. Judge Ramirez turned to him directly. "Mr. Torres," she said, "did you prevent hospital staff from taking your granddaughter for a CT scan?" "I suggested we wait," Vincent said stiffly. "That's not what I asked," the judge replied. "Did you physically block staff from taking her?" Vincent's jaw worked. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering urgently. "Yes," Vincent snapped. "I stood in the doorway." "And why?" Judge Ramirez asked. Vincent straightened, a familiar arrogance creeping into his posture. "I believe they were being aggressive. Unnecessary procedures. She needed to toughen up." "Because she was a girl," the judge said flatly. "Or because you genuinely believed the treatment was inappropriate." The room went silent. Arthur Whitmore leaned in again, whispering. Vincent's face twisted. "Those comments were taken out of context," he said angrily. Rachel leaned forward. "What context makes 'don't waste resources on her' acceptable when referring to a child with head trauma?" Vincent slammed his hand on the table. "I was frustrated." "For 26 minutes, Judge Ramirez said, while a child needed care." She raised a hand, cutting him off before he could speak again. "That's enough. I'm granting the emergency protective order." The words echoed in the room. "Mr. Torres, you are prohibited from any contact with Lily Torres, effective immediately. Any violation of this order will result in arrest." Vincent shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "That woman has poisoned my son against his own family." "Sit down," Judge Ramirez said sharply, "or I will hold you in contempt." Vincent sat, breathing hard. Colin finally spoke. "Your Honor," he said, voice shaking. "May I say something?" The judge nodded. "I support the protective order," Colin said. "I don't want my father near my daughter." The room froze. Vincent turned to him slowly, eyes blazing. "David," he hissed, "what are you doing?" Colin swallowed. "It's Colin," he said quietly. "You've been calling me David for 30 years. That's not my name." Vincent's face darkened. "You're taking her side," he spat. "I'm taking my daughter's side," Colin said, voice breaking but firm. "The daughter you decided wasn't worth saving because she's not the grandson you wanted." Vincent laughed harshly. "Everything I built was supposed to be for you and your sons." She's 9, Colin shot back. And you've already decided her life doesn't matter because she might change her last name someday? Judge Ramirez watched closely, pen moving across her notepad. Mr. Torres, she said to Vincent, I'm also ordering you to complete a family therapy program focused on gender bias before you can petition to modify this order. Additionally, this case is being referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Vincent surged to his feet again. Criminal charges, he shouted. Child endangerment is a crime, Judge Ramirez replied calmly. We are done here. Vincent stormed out, his lawyer scrambling after him. Colin remained seated, head in his hands. After the room emptied, it was just Colin and me in the hallway. Can I see her? He asked quietly. She's been asking about you, I said. I need to apologize, he whispered. To her. To you. Rachel and Jordan gave us space. Colin looked up at me, eyes red. I'm done with him, he said, completely. Mom left him last week. She moved to Spokane. She said she should have left 30 years ago. Something inside me loosened. I'm glad she got out, I said. So am I, he replied. We stood there, no longer husband and wife, but parents, facing the wreckage of something neither of us had wanted to see. And for the first time, I believed Colin when he said he was choosing Lily, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. 3 months passed, not quickly, not cleanly. Healing never does. Life didn't snap back into place the way people like to promise after a crisis. It shifted, creaked, demanded adjustments in places I hadn't known were load-bearing. Vincent was formally charged with child endangerment 6 weeks after the hearing. When the news came, it arrived quietly. An email from Rachel with a scanned copy of the filing and a single line beneath it. This is moving forward. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing my laptop and going back to the kitchen, where Lily was sitting at the table, tongue poked out in concentration, as she assembled a small wheeled robot from a kit she'd saved her allowance to buy. She looked up at me and smiled. Mom, look, she said proudly. I figured out why it wasn't turning. The motor was backward. Something in my chest tightened. That's what mattered. Not Vincent. Not the case number. This girl, solving problems, trusting her mind. Colin testified against his father. He told me ahead of time, his voice steady but quiet. I need to do this, he said. Not because the court wants it. Because Lily deserves to hear one day that I chose her when it counted. Dr. Sarah Nguyen also testified. She spoke about the long-term psychological damage caused by repeated gender-based devaluation, about how children internalize messages from authority figures, about how being told, implicitly or explicitly, that you matter less shapes the way you see yourself for decades. Vincent sat at the defense table, jaw clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Colin. When the verdict came, it wasn't dramatic. Convicted. 2 years probation. Mandatory counseling. Community service. A permanent protective order barring him from any contact with Lily. He was also ordered to pay for Lily's therapy and all medical expenses related to the incident. The gavel fell, and that was it. Vincent Torres, the man who built empires and broke spirits, left the courtroom smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not humbled, just diminished. Like a shadow that had finally been forced into the light. His wife never came back. Colin told me she filed for divorce from Spokane, where she'd moved in with her sister. She took a job at a small bookstore and signed up for watercolor classes. She sounds happy, Colin said one night, surprised by his own tone. I'm glad, I replied, and I meant it. She started sending Lily birthday cards, funny ones, dogs wearing hats. Sometimes she'd call just to talk, to ask Lily about school, about robots, about the things Vincent never bothered to learn. Colin rebuilt his relationship with Lily slowly. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic apologies meant to erase years of silence, just consistency, therapy appointments, robotics competitions, dinners twice a week where he listened more than he spoke. One night, Lily told me, Dad doesn't say that's just how Grandpa is anymore. I nodded. What does he say? She shrugged. He says, that wasn't okay. That mattered more than anything. Lily still had moments. Days when Vincent's words echoed in her head, when she asked questions that broke my heart in new ways. "Mom," she asked once, lying beside me on the couch, "do boys' brains work better than girls?" I turned to face her fully. "No," I said without hesitation. "Brains work better when people are allowed to use them. That's it." She thought about that. "Okay," she said, satisfied, and went back to her book. Dr. Nguyen said Lily was doing remarkably well. "She's learning to identify intrusive thoughts," she told me. "She's learning they aren't facts. That's huge." As for me, I slept better. Not perfectly, but better. The house felt different without the low hum of tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. Not spotless. Life with a 9-year-old never is, but clean in a way that mattered. The kind of clean that comes from removing what was poisoning the air, not scrubbing harder around it. One evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me, serious. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Thank you for yelling at Grandpa Vincent." I blinked. "I didn't yell." She smiled faintly. "You stood up. That was louder." My throat closed. "I'll always stand up for you," I said. She nodded like that was the most natural thing in the world, like it had always been true. Later that night, alone in the quiet, I thought about everything Vincent had lost. His granddaughter, his son, his marriage, his reputation, his freedom. I wondered, briefly, if he thought it had been worth it. If clinging to an outdated idea of value had been worth the cost. But then I stopped wondering, because Vincent was no longer my concern. Lily was. She was thriving, building robots, asking impossible questions, growing up with the unshakable knowledge that her worth was not conditional, not negotiable, not dependent on anyone else's approval. And if she ever forgot, even for a moment, I'd remind her. Because sometimes protecting the people you love means standing up to family. Because silence isn't peace. Because love, when mixed with cruelty, is still cruelty. And because the most important thing I could ever teach my daughter was this: you do not need to earn your right to be protected. You already deserve it.